My daughter told me our Hawaii trip was cancelled just 3 days before departure. 8 months of planning gone in a 30-second phone call. She said it was a work emergency, urgent, unavoidable. But that same night, I saw something she forgot to hide. A confirmation email. Flights still booked. Resort still paid. Everything still real. So the trip wasn't cancelled, I just wasn't invited anymore. And at 67 years old, I never thought the person who would lie to me so easily would be my own daughter. If this opening already makes your heart tighten a little, please take a moment to like this video. It truly helps stories like mine reach others who might need them. And if you've ever felt shut out by someone you love, I'd really like to hear your story. Where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Don't forget to subscribe, because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. After my husband David passed away 8 years ago, the house became unbearably quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you grow to appreciate with age, but the kind that echoes. Every clock tick sounded louder, every room felt bigger, and every memory sharper. Rachel was the one who kept me from falling apart. She started coming over every Sunday, just like we used to when David was still with us. At first, she said it was to check on me, but over time it became something we both relied on. We'd cook together nothing fancy, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, sometimes her favorite lemon pasta. She'd sit at the kitchen counter while I moved around, pretending I didn't notice how often she watched me, as if making sure I was still okay. And truthfully, I did the same with her. We talked about everything back then: her job, my old students, the books I was reading, even the little things like how the neighbor's dog kept digging holes under my fence. It felt like we had rebuilt something new from the grief, not replacing what we lost, but learning how to live around it. That's why the Hawaii trip meant so much. It was Rachel's idea. She brought it up one evening about 8 months ago. We were sitting in the living room, a blanket over both our laps, watching some cooking show neither of us was really paying attention to. Out of nowhere, she said, "Mom, we should go somewhere, just the two of us." I remember laughing softly. "Where would we go at our age, Hawaii?" she said immediately, like she had already decided. "You've always wanted to go." And she was right. It had been a dream of mine for years, but life always got in the way. First raising Rachel, then supporting David through his illness, then learning how to survive without him. Hawaii was one of those maybe someday dreams I had quietly tucked away, until Rachel pulled it back out into the light. "We deserve it," she said. "A fresh start. No stress. No memories tied to home. Just us." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until my eyes filled with tears. From that moment on, the trip became our shared project. Rachel handled most of the bookings. She was always better with technology, but she involved me in everything. She'd send me pictures of resorts and ask ocean view or garden. She'd call me during lunch breaks to debate between snorkeling tours or cultural shows. Sometimes late at night, she'd text me links to restaurants we could try. It felt like we were building something together again, something hopeful. But looking back now, I can see the shift. At first, it was small things. Rachel started taking more phone calls when she was at my house. Not unusual at first, her job was demanding, but these calls were different. She'd step outside or into another room, lowering her voice. Once I walked past the hallway and heard her say, "I know I just need more time." When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and smiled like nothing had happened. I didn't question it then. I trusted her. Then there were the moments when she seemed distracted. I'd be telling her a story, something simple, and halfway through I'd realize she wasn't really listening. Her eyes would drift, her fingers tapping lightly against her phone as if she was waiting for something. "Rachel," I'd say, gently. "Oh, sorry, Mum," she'd respond quickly, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff. Always work." It became her answer for everything. One Sunday, while we were finalizing some details for the trip, I noticed something else. Should we invite anyone else? I asked casually. Maybe one of your friends? Or, I don't know, make it a group trip. She looked up sharply, too sharply. No, she said almost too fast. Then she softened her tone. I mean, I really want this to be just us. Don't you? There was something in her eyes I couldn't quite place. Not anger, not even defensiveness. It was more like urgency, like she needed me to agree. So I did. Of course, I said. Just us. She smiled then, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That moment stayed with me longer than I expected. Another time, about a month before the trip, she cancelled our Sunday dinner. That alone wasn't unusual, life happens, but she didn't offer to reschedule. When I called her later that week, she sounded tired, distant. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, just a lot going on, she said. I'll explain later. Okay. Later never came. Instead, she doubled down on the Hawaii plans. She sent me a detailed itinerary, almost too detailed. Every hour accounted for, every activity pre-booked. It felt less like a vacation and more like something carefully constructed. At the time, I thought she was just being thorough. Now I'm not so sure. The week before our departure, she came over to drop off some printed documents, flight confirmations, hotel reservations, excursion tickets. She handed them to me in a neat folder, her movements precise. Just in case, she said. I teased her lightly. You act like we're going on a military operation. She laughed, but again, it felt forced. That was the day she left her iPad on my kitchen counter. I remember noticing it after she had already driven off. I picked it up, intending to call her and let her know, but then I thought she'd probably come back for it once she realized. So I set it aside. I had no idea that small forgotten device would change everything. Because up until that point, despite the little signs, despite the subtle distance growing between us, I still believed in what we had. I believed in the Sundays. I believed in the shared meals. I believed in the way she once looked at me like I was her safe place. And most of all, I believed in that trip. Hawaii wasn't just a vacation. It was proof to me at least that we were still okay, that whatever had shifted between us could be fixed, that we still had time. But now, sitting alone in my quiet house after that sudden cancellation call, replaying every conversation, every glance, every moment that didn't quite make sense, a question began to take root in my mind. Not loud at first, just a whisper. What if the trip was never really about us? The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact moment because I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug I hadn't even finished. The sky outside was grey, the kind of dull, heavy grey that presses down on everything. My phone buzzed on the counter beside me, and when I saw Rachel's name on the screen, I smiled automatically. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I reached for a towel. Mum, Her voice was tight. Not just busy, not just distracted. Tight. I paused. What's wrong? I asked, my hand stilling mid-motion. There was a brief silence on the other end, just long enough for my chest to tighten. I need to tell you something, she said. About the trip. Something in the way she said it made my stomach drop. The Hawaii trip, I asked, even though I already knew that's what she meant. Yeah. It's cancelled. The word hung there flat and heavy. Cancelled. I blinked, trying to process it. Cancelled? What do you mean cancelled? There's been an issue at work, she said quickly. Too quickly. A major client situation. I can't leave right now. I've tried to rearrange things, but it's just not possible. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge. Okay, but can't we just postpone it? Move it a few weeks or a month? No, she said immediately. The speed of her answer startled me. I mean, It's complicated, she added, her tone softening just a fraction. The booking's my schedule. It's just not going to work. I frowned. That didn't sound like Rachel. She was always the one who found solutions, who reorganized, who made things happen even when they seemed impossible. You've already planned everything so carefully, I said gently. I'm sure we can figure something out together. Mum. I said it's cancelled. Her voice sharpened, not loud but firm in a way that felt final. I went quiet. There it was again. That edge, that urgency. I wish you'd told me sooner, I said after a moment, my voice softer now. We were supposed to leave in 3 days. I know, she replied quickly. I'm sorry. This all came up suddenly. Another silence followed, this one heavier. I waited for her to fill it, to explain more, to say something, anything that would make this feel real, logical, understandable. But she didn't. Instead, she said, I have to go. I'm in the middle of something. I straightened slightly. Wait, Rachel, I'll call you later, okay? And then the line went dead. Just like that. No reassurance, no follow-up. No, we'll figure something else out. Just gone. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear, staring at the blank screen as if it might offer an explanation if I looked long enough. The kitchen felt colder somehow. I stood there for a while, not moving, the damp towel still in my hand. My mind tried to catch up with what had just happened, replaying the conversation over and over again. Cancelled, work emergency, no reschedule. It didn't make sense. Rachel had always been driven, yes. Her career mattered to her, of course it did. I was proud of her for that. But she had also been the one pushing for this trip, the one who insisted we needed it, the one who said it was important. So how could something sudden be enough to make her walk away from all of it without even trying to adjust? And why did she sound like she didn't want to talk about it? I set the phone down slowly on the counter, my fingers lingering on it for a moment before pulling away. Maybe I was overthinking. That's what I told myself at first. Maybe she really was overwhelmed. Maybe something big had come up at work, something she couldn't share yet. I had worked for decades myself. I knew how unpredictable things could be. But even as I tried to reason through it, something inside me refused to settle. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, the way she cut me off when I tried to offer solutions, the way she rushed through the explanation, the way she ended the call before I could ask more questions. That wasn't Rachel, not the Rachel I knew. I moved into the living room, lowering myself slowly onto the couch. The folder she had given me a few days earlier, the one with all our travel documents, sat neatly on the coffee table. I stared at it. Just days ago, that folder had represented excitement, anticipation, a future moment we were both looking forward to. Now it felt like something else, something unfinished, something wrong. I reached for it, hesitating only briefly before opening it. Inside were printed copies of everything: flight details, hotel reservations, activity confirmations. Rachel had organized it all with her usual precision, each page neatly labeled. I flipped through them slowly. Departure, Friday morning. Return the following week. Resort fully prepaid. Everything looked intact. There was no indication of cancellation, no notes, no changes. I frowned, my fingers tightening slightly on the paper. Maybe she hadn't had time to update the documents yet, I thought. Maybe everything had happened too quickly. Yes, that had to be it. I closed the folder again, exhaling slowly as I leaned back against the couch. But the uneasy feeling remained. I tried to distract myself for the rest of the afternoon. I turned on the television, but I couldn't focus on anything. I picked up a book, read the same paragraph 3 times, and still couldn't remember what it said. Even making dinner felt like going through the motions of something I no longer had the energy for. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing at my phone, half expecting it to light up with Rachel's name. She said she'd call later. Evening came, then night. No call. By 9 o'clock, I told myself she must still be busy. By 10, I told myself she was probably exhausted and would call tomorrow. By 11, I stopped telling myself anything at all. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the quiet pressing in around me again, just like it had after David died. Only this time the silence felt different. Back then it was grief. Now it felt like distance, like something or someone was slowly pulling away from me and I didn't understand why. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my hands clasped together. Work emergency, I whispered to myself. The words sounded hollow in the empty room. I thought about calling her back, just to check in, just to hear her voice again and maybe ask a few more questions. But something stopped me. A strange hesitation. What if she didn't answer? Or worse, what if she did and gave me the same short closed-off responses? I wasn't sure which would hurt more. So I stayed where I was, staring at the darkened screen of my phone, and that was when a quiet, uncomfortable thought slipped into my mind. Not loud, not dramatic, just persistent. What if she didn't want me to ask questions? What if the problem wasn't that she couldn't explain, but that she didn't want to? I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just about a cancelled trip. It was about something she was deliberately keeping from me, and I had no idea what it was. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had anywhere to go, but because sleep had become impossible sometime around 3 in the morning. My mind had replayed Rachel's voice over and over again until even my dreams felt restless. By the time the first light slipped through the curtains, I was already sitting on the edge of my bed staring at nothing in particular. The house felt heavier than usual. I made myself a cup of coffee, though I didn't really want it, and carried it into the kitchen. That was when I noticed it again. Rachel's iPad. It was still sitting exactly where I had left it on the counter, the screen dark, the slim case slightly open. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it, my fingers tightening around the mug. I should call her. That was the reasonable thing to do. Tell her she left it behind. Ask when she wanted to pick it up. Keep things simple, normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. My eyes lingered on the device a little longer than they should have. A quiet discomfort crept in, followed by something I didn't like to admit: curiosity. No, not curiosity, concern. At least that's what I told myself. Rachel had sounded off. The trip didn't make sense. The timing didn't make sense. And if something really was wrong, something she wasn't telling me, then didn't I have the right to understand why I set the coffee down slowly? Just to check the booking, I murmured under my breath, as if saying it out loud would make it more acceptable. Just to confirm everything really was cancelled. My hand hovered over the iPad for a moment before I finally picked it up. The screen lit up instantly. No password. Rachel had never hidden things from me before. That thought alone made my chest tighten. I hesitated again, my reflection faintly visible on the glass screen. For a brief second, I considered putting it back down, walking away, respecting her privacy. But then I heard her voice in my mind, sharp, rushed, final. It's cancelled. And something inside me shifted. I opened the mail app. The inbox loaded quickly, a long list of emails filling the screen. Most of them were work-related subject lines full of marketing reports, client names, deadlines. I scrolled past them, my heart beating a little faster than I expected. Then I saw it. Subject: your trip to Hawaii, booking confirmation. My breath caught. I tapped on it. The email opened bright and clear, the details neatly laid out. Flight confirmed. Departure, Friday morning. Return unchanged. I frowned, my eyes scanning the page more quickly now. Hotel confirmed. Oceanfront suite, fully paid. No cancellation notice, no updates, no changes. Everything was exactly as it had been when Rachel printed those documents. My fingers tightened around the edge of the iPad. "That's not possible," I whispered. Maybe there was another email, a cancellation that came later, something she hadn't printed yet. I went back to the inbox, scrolling more urgently this time. My eyes moved rapidly over subject lines, searching for anything that might explain what I was seeing. Nothing. No cancellation, no refund, no indication that anything had changed at all. A strange, cold sensation spread through my chest. If the trip was still active, then Rachel hadn't cancelled it. She had lied. The realization didn't come all at once. It settled slowly like a weight pressing down on me. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair, the iPad still in my hands. "No," I said softly, shaking my head. "There has to be another explanation. There had to be. Rachel wouldn't lie to me, not like that, not about something like this." I went back into the email, forcing myself to read more carefully. That's when I saw it. Guest details. My name was listed first, just as expected. Monica Stewart. Below it, Rachel Stewart. And then a third name. I blinked, leaning closer to the screen as if I had misread it. Emily Carter. The name didn't mean anything to me. I searched my memory quickly. A co-worker, a friend, someone Rachel had mentioned before. Nothing. I had never heard that name in my life. My heart began to pound, slow but heavy. Why would there be another adult listed on a trip that was supposed to be just the two of us? My eyes moved further down the page. Additional guest one child. The words seemed to blur for a second before snapping back into focus. A child. I felt my breath catch somewhere in my chest. Rachel didn't have children, at least, not that I knew of. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to piece together what I was seeing. 3 guests, 2 adults, 1 child. None of this made sense. Unless... No. I shook my head again, more firmly this time. I was jumping to conclusions. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Emily was a friend going through something and Rachel had decided to bring her along. Maybe the child belonged to her. Yes, that could be it. But then, why lie? Why not just tell me? Why say the trip was cancelled entirely instead of explaining that plans had changed? My fingers trembled slightly as I locked the iPad and set it down on the table. The room felt different now, smaller, tighter, as if the walls had shifted just enough to make everything feel unfamiliar. I pressed my hands together, trying to steady them. "Think," I whispered. "Just think." Rachel had lied. There was no avoiding that anymore. The trip was still happening. She had added another adult and a child. And for some reason, she had chosen not to tell me. Not only that, she had chosen to remove me from it completely. A sharp ache spread through my chest, deeper than anything I had felt the night before. This wasn't just confusion anymore. This was something else. Something closer to betrayal. I pushed myself up from the chair and began pacing slowly across the kitchen, my mind racing through possibilities. Who was Emily Carter? Why was there a child? And most importantly, why didn't Rachel want me there? I stopped suddenly, my breath catching again as another thought surfaced. What if this wasn't about work at all? What if the emergency was just an excuse? What if she had planned this from the beginning? The idea sent a chill down my spine. No, that couldn't be true. Could it? I turned back toward the table, staring at the iPad as if it might offer more answers if I looked hard enough. But it didn't. It just sat there silent and still holding a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. For a long moment, I stood there, caught between what I wanted to believe and what the evidence was telling me. Then slowly, something inside me shifted again. The confusion, the hurt, they didn't disappear, But they began to harden into something else, something sharper. If Rachel wasn't going to tell me the truth, then I was going to find it myself. I didn't recognize myself that afternoon. For most of my life, I had been the kind of woman who trusted first and questioned later. I believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially my own daughter. Even after everything I had just seen on that iPad, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe there was a simple explanation waiting just out of reach. But another part of me, quieter, steadier, was beginning to take control. The part that didn't want comfort. The part that wanted truth. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the iPad still in front of me, and forced myself to think clearly. Jumping to conclusions wouldn't help. If Rachel was hiding something, then I needed facts, not guesses, not assumptions. Facts. I picked up the iPad again this time, with more intention than hesitation. If she had lied about the trip, then there might be other clues. I opened her messages, first scrolling carefully. Most of the conversations were what you'd expect, short exchanges with coworkers, reminders, links. Nothing unusual at first glance, but then I noticed a thread that wasn't saved under a name. Just a phone number. That alone made my stomach tighten. I tapped on it. The conversation loaded slowly, each message appearing one after another, and as I read, I felt something inside me begin to unravel. Unknown, is everything still on track for Friday, Rachel? Yes. I told her it's cancelled. I stopped breathing. My eyes moved to the next line. Unknown. Are you sure that's the best way, Rachel? It's the only way. She wouldn't understand. A sharp pain spread through my chest, so sudden I had to press my hand against it. She wouldn't understand. The words echoed in my mind over and over again. Understand what? What exactly was I being kept from? I kept reading, even though part of me wanted to stop. Unknown. Lily is nervous. Rachel. I know. I am too. But this has to happen. Lily, another name I didn't recognize. My grip tightened on the iPad. Unknown. Emily says, thank you again. Rachel. She doesn't have to thank me. I owe this. Emily, the same name from the booking. My heart was pounding now louder than any thought I was trying to form. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was something real, something planned, something Rachel had been actively hiding from me. I scrolled further, my hands trembling despite my effort to stay calm. Unknown. Are you going to tell your mom after Rachel? I don't know yet. That was the last message in the thread. I stared at those words longer than I should have. I don't know yet. Not no, not yes. Just uncertainty. I slowly locked the iPad and set it down again, my mind racing in too many directions at once. So now I had more pieces. Rachel hadn't just lied impulsively. This was planned. She told someone, this unknown number, that she had already told me the trip was cancelled. She believed I wouldn't understand whatever she was doing. There was a person named Emily involved, and someone named Lily, who was nervous. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling shakily. What are you doing, Rachel? I whispered. The kitchen felt colder than ever. I sat there for a long time trying to organize the information in my head. 3 names. Emily, Lily, and the unknown number, a hidden plan, a lie told directly to me, and a trip that was very much still happening. The more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. This wasn't about work, not even close. Rachel had constructed that explanation as a shield, something quick and believable to stop me from asking questions. And it had almost worked. Almost. A wave of hurt washed over me again, heavier this time. She really thought I wouldn't understand. After everything we had been through together, after all those Sundays, after everything I had done to be there for her, was that how she saw me now? Someone who needed to be managed, protected from the truth, or worse, excluded from it. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. No, I said under my breath. No, that's not enough. If Rachel believed I couldn't understand, then maybe she had never really given me the chance. And if she wasn't going to tell me the truth, then I would have to go and see it for myself. The thought came suddenly, but once it was there, it didn't leave. Hawaii. The trip was still happening. Rachel would be there. Emily would be there. Lily would be there. Whatever this was, whatever she was hiding, it was all going to unfold there. I turned toward the living room, my steps slow but steady now. Could I really do it? Book a flight on my own, show up unannounced, confront whatever I might find. At 67 years old, I had never been the type to chase answers across the ocean. I had lived a careful life, a structured life, the kind where you respect boundaries and wait for people to come to you when they're ready. But something about this felt different. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was about being pushed out of something that was supposed to include me. This was about being lied to deliberately. And more than anything, this was about my daughter. I walked over to my desk where my laptop sat closed. My reflection stared back at me briefly from the dark screen, older than I sometimes felt. Yes, but not fragile, not incapable, not someone who needed to be kept in the dark. I opened the laptop slowly. The screen lit up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, hesitation creeping in one last time. What if I was wrong? What if there really was an explanation I just didn't see yet? What if showing up unannounced only made things worse? I swallowed my throat, tightening, but then I remembered the messages. She wouldn't understand. I told her it's cancelled. And just like that, the hesitation faded. Because whatever Rachel believed about me, I deserved the truth. I opened a travel website and typed in the destination Honolulu, Hawaii. Flights appeared instantly, dozens of options. I scanned them quickly, my heartbeat steadying with each passing second. There was one leaving Thursday evening, arriving early Friday morning, just hours before the original itinerary Rachel had planned. Perfect. Too perfect. I stared at the screen for a long moment, knowing that once I clicked that button, there would be no turning back. No pretending I didn't know. No going back to quiet Sunday dinners where everything felt normal on the surface. This would change things, maybe permanently. But then again, hadn't things already changed? I took a slow breath and clicked book. The confirmation email arrived within minutes. I stared at it for a long time without opening it fully, as if acknowledging it too directly would make everything irreversible in a way I couldn't undo. But of course, it already was irreversible. The moment I clicked book, something in my life shifted quietly, permanently. I had a flight to Hawaii, not for a vacation anymore, for the truth. I closed my laptop slowly and sat back in my chair. The house around me felt unusually still, like it was holding its breath. I tried to listen for something normal, birds outside a passing car, but even the ordinary sounds felt distant, muffled, like I was already separating from the world I knew. My thoughts kept circling back to Rachel. Her voice on the phone, the sharpness, the finality, the way she ended the call before I could ask anything else, and then the messages. I told her, it's cancelled. She wouldn't understand. Those words were not accidental. They were chosen, deliberate. And that realization hurt more than anything else so far, because it meant Rachel didn't just lie to me. She had categorized me, decided what I could and could not handle, decided what I deserved to know. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the quiet street. A neighbor's car passed slowly. Someone's dog barked in the distance, life continuing normally, completely unaware that something inside my own life had just cracked open. I pressed my palm lightly against the glass. "How did we get here?" I whispered. But there was no answer waiting outside, only silence. That afternoon, I tried to go about my usual routine. I washed a few dishes that weren't dirty. I folded laundry that had already been folded once. I even sat down with a book I had been reading for weeks, though I couldn't remember a single sentence I turned the page to. My mind wasn't in the house anymore. It was already ahead of me, on a plane, on an island, on something I couldn't yet see clearly. Every so often, I would pause and replay the same thought: Emily Carter, Lily, a child, a secret. Each name felt like a thread I was being forced to follow without knowing where it led. And Rachel, my daughter, was at the center of it all, holding the knot tightly enough that I couldn't see what was tied behind it. At some point, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my suitcase in the closet. I hadn't touched it in years, not since David passed. The sight of it brought back a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for, packing together for trips we never took, laughing about overpacking, arguing over whether just-in-case items were really necessary. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Not like this," I murmured, but there was no other way now. That evening, I received a message from Rachel. Just one line: "Sorry again about the trip. I'll explain everything when I can." No call, no details, no acknowledgement of the distance she had created. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that explanation was still coming. But after everything I had seen, when I can no longer felt like reassurance, it felt like delay, like control, like another door quietly closing. I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone down and turned it face down on the table. For the first time since this began, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not anger. Something more focused. Clarity. The next morning, I went through the motions of preparing for travel. I packed slowly, carefully, almost mechanically. Clothes, documents, essentials. I checked everything twice, then a third time, not because I was forgetful, but because I needed something physical to ground me while my thoughts remained scattered. Every item I placed into the suitcase felt heavier than it should have, not because of weight, because of meaning. Each object belonged to a version of me that still believed this trip had been about a mother and daughter reconnecting. Now it was something else entirely. A pursuit. A confrontation waiting to happen. I paused before adding a simple photograph to my bag, one of Rachel and me from years ago. We were standing in front of our old house, both smiling, her arm around me, my hand resting lightly on hers. We looked easy, uncomplicated, like nothing in the world could come between us. I hesitated for a long time before sliding it into the inner pocket of my suitcase. Not because I needed to bring the memory with me, but because I needed to remember what I was fighting for. Later that day, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table again, staring at nothing. My mind drifted unexpectedly to David. He always used to say I was too patient for my own good. Monica, he would tease you, wait for answers like, "They're going to politely knock on the door." At the time, I would laugh. Now I wasn't laughing. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going to find them. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fragments. Rachel's face tight controlled, the unknown messages, the name Emily Carter, a child I had never heard of, and underneath it all the same question looping endlessly: why didn't she trust me with the truth? At some point around 4 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and simply sat in the dark living room listening to the house breathe around me. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place I was about to leave behind. Not permanently, but long enough for everything to change. As dawn approached, I stood by the window again, watching the sky slowly shift from black to grey-blue. In a few hours, I would leave for the airport. In less than a day, I would be on my way to Hawaii, to Rachel, to Emily Carter, to Lily, to something I no longer understood but could no longer ignore. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase handle and exhaled slowly. I hope you're ready, Rachel, I whispered into the empty room, because I was no longer just your mother waiting for answers. I was someone who had decided not to be left in the dark anymore, and whatever truth you were hiding, I was coming to see it for myself. The airport always feels like a place suspended between realities, where people are neither here nor there, but somewhere in between, holding on to luggage and thoughts they haven't fully sorted out yet. That morning, I felt like I belonged exactly in that in-between space. I sat near my gate in Honolulu International Airport, my hands folded tightly in my lap, watching strangers pass by, families laughing, couples arguing softly, business travelers staring into laptops like they could disappear into them. Normal life, the kind I used to belong to without thinking twice. My flight had landed just over an hour earlier, and the humid Hawaiian air still clung to my skin, warm and unfamiliar. It should have felt like the beginning of a vacation. That's what this place was supposed to be. But nothing about this felt like a vacation anymore. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and checked my phone again. No new messages from Rachel. Not even a confirmation that she had arrived safely. Not even a simple, "Are you okay?" after I had stopped replying. That silence said more than words ever could. I stood up slowly, my joints aching slightly from the long flight, and made my way toward the exit. Outside, the heat hit me immediately, thick, tropical, almost overwhelming compared to what I was used to. The sunlight reflected off everything, too bright, too alive. For a moment, I hesitated. I could still turn around, go back, book a hotel somewhere far from here, pretend this was just a strange impulse I could forget once I returned home. But then I remembered the messages again. I told her it's cancelled. She wouldn't understand. No. Turning around was no longer an option. I called a taxi and gave the address of the resort listed in the booking email. My voice sounded steady even though my hands weren't. The drive felt longer than it should have been. Palm trees blurred past the window. Ocean glimpses appeared and disappeared like fleeting thoughts I couldn't fully grasp. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on breathing, reminding myself that I wasn't here by accident. I was here because something was wrong, and I needed to know what it was. When the taxi pulled up to the resort, I felt my stomach tighten. It was beautiful, of course it was. White buildings, open balconies, water shimmering in every direction. Couples walked hand in hand across the lobby. Laughter drifted from somewhere near the pool. It looked like the kind of place where secrets didn't exist. But I knew better now. I stepped out slowly, thanked the driver, and stood still for a moment, taking it all in. This was it. No more guessing, no more imagining. Whatever Rachel had been hiding from me had brought me here. I walked into the lobby. Cool air rushed over me immediately, and for a brief second, I felt out of place in a way I couldn't explain. I approached the front desk, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I believe there's a reservation under the name Rachel Stewart," I said. The receptionist smiled politely and checked the screen. "Yes, we have her checked in, along with 2 other guests." My heart tightened slightly. 2 others. Emily Carter and the child. "Can you tell me where their rooms are located?" I asked carefully. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "We can't share guest room information." "Of course," I nodded, forcing a small smile. "I understand." I stepped away from the desk, my mind already working. If I couldn't get information directly, I would have to find another way. I took a seat in the lobby lounge area, pretending to read a brochure while observing quietly. Minutes passed, then an hour. People came and went. Staff moved efficiently behind the desk. Life continued around me as if I weren't sitting there with a secret burning in my chest. And then I saw her, Rachel. She walked in through the entrance with quick, determined steps, her hair slightly windblown, her face tense in a way I hadn't seen before. She wasn't alone. Behind her were 2 figures. A woman, early to mid-30s, I guessed. Calm posture, gentle expression, and beside her, a teenage girl. My breath caught instantly. The girl looked around the lobby nervously, holding onto the woman's hand. There was something familiar in her face, though I couldn't place it immediately. Something that tugged at me in a way I didn't understand. Rachel spoke quickly to them, her tone low but urgent. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Then she turned slightly, and for a brief moment her eyes swept across the lobby. They landed on me. Everything stopped. Her expression changed instantly, shock, disbelief, something close to panic. "Mom," she mouthed silently. I didn't move. I couldn't, because in that moment, everything I had suspected, everything I had feared, suddenly shifted from theory into reality. She was here, and she hadn't told me. Rachel took a step forward, then stopped again, as if unsure whether she was seeing me or imagining me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stand. "That's a good question," I said quietly. "What are you doing here, Rachel?" The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had experienced so far. Emily, if that was her, looked between us, confused but alert. The teenage girl stood closer to her, her grip tightening. Rachel exhaled shakily. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. My chest tightened painfully. "Then tell me now," I replied. "Because I've been trying to understand this for days." Her eyes flickered, and for the first time since this began, I saw something break through her carefully controlled exterior. Fear. Not of me, but of what she was about to reveal. She swallowed hard, and then she said the words that changed everything again. "Mom, this isn't what you think." But I already knew. Whatever I thought it was going to be worse, or more complicated, or both. And I was finally standing right in the middle of it. Rachel stood there in the hotel lobby like she had forgotten how to move. For a few seconds after her words, "This isn't what you think," no one spoke. The air between us felt thick, almost physical, like something we were all trapped inside together. I didn't look away from her. Not this time. "Then explain it," I said quietly. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, controlled, not soft like before, not confused. Something had changed inside me during the long flight, during the hours of silence, during every unanswered message. Rachel swallowed hard. Emily shifted slightly beside her, protective but cautious. The teenage girl, Lily, looked up at Rachel with uncertain eyes, as if waiting for permission to exist in this moment. Rachel finally exhaled. "Not here," she said. "Please." I glanced around the lobby. People were passing by, luggage rolling, soft music playing from hidden speakers. No one cared about the quiet war happening in the middle of the room, but I did, and so did she. Then, where I asked. Rachel hesitated, then nodded toward a seating area near the back of the lobby, partially hidden by large indoor plants. We moved there slowly. Every step felt like crossing into something irreversible. When we sat down, I placed my hands in my lap again, but this time I didn't try to hide my tension. Rachel sat across from me. Emily and Lily stayed slightly behind her, as if unsure whether they were allowed to be part of this conversation. For a moment, Rachel didn't speak. She looked down at her hands. Then she looked at me, and I saw it clearly. Now this wasn't just fear, it was guilt. Deep, heavy, years-old guilt. "I didn't cancel the trip," she said finally. My jaw tightened slightly, but I stayed silent. "I told you that because I didn't know how else to stop the questions," she continued. "I needed time. I needed space to get here first." "To get here," I repeated. She nodded slowly. My eyes shifted briefly to Emily and the girl. "And them," I asked. Rachel's breath trembled. "This is Emily Carter," she said. "And this is Lily." The name hit the air like something I had been waiting for without knowing it. Lily. I looked at the girl more closely now. 13, maybe 14. Light brown hair, nervous posture, familiar eyes. And suddenly something inside me clicked in a way that made my chest tighten painfully. Not recognition, not yet, but something dangerously close. Rachel continued before I could speak. "Mom, Lily is my daughter." The world didn't go silent, but it felt like it slowed down. I blinked once, then again. I heard the words. I understood the words. But my mind refused them at first, like they didn't belong in the same reality I was standing in. "That's not possible," I said immediately. Rachel flinched slightly. "It is," she whispered. I shook my head once slowly. "No," I said again, firmer this time. "Rachel, you don't have a child." Her eyes filled instantly. "I did," she said. I didn't tell you." The words landed harder than I expected. I leaned back slightly in my seat, my hands gripping the edge of the chair. "You didn't tell me," I repeated. "Rachel, I am your mother." Her voice cracked. "I know." Emily looked down quietly, her expression softening with something like sympathy, but also understanding. Lily stared at the floor, silent. Rachel continued. "I was 25 when I had her," she said. "I wasn't ready. I was scared. I was working 2 jobs trying to build a career. I didn't have stability. I didn't think I could be what she needed." My chest tightened, but I didn't interrupt. "So I made a decision," she said quietly. "I arranged for Emily to take care of her." My eyes shifted to Emily. She nodded gently. "We're not strangers," Emily said softly. "I've been raising Lily since she was a baby." My mind struggled to process it. Rachel had a child, and she had hidden her existence from me for over a decade. Why, I finally asked. The word came out quieter than I intended. Rachel looked at me, tears now clearly forming. "Because of you," she said. The sentence struck like a slap. I stiffened. "What does that mean?" Her hands trembled. "You always expected things to be perfect," she said carefully. "You always did everything so right, so structured, so controlled. I grew up believing that anything less than perfect would disappoint you. I felt something cold settle in my stomach." "That's not true," I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't entirely sure. Rachel shook her head. "Mum, I was terrified of telling you I had a baby out of wedlock. I was terrified you would look at me differently, that I would lose you." Silence. Heavy silence. Lily shifted slightly in her seat, glancing at Rachel. Rachel reached for her hand gently. "That's why this trip matters," she said, her voice shaking. "This was supposed to be the first time I finally brought her back into my life properly. I wanted to introduce her to you, slowly, carefully. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want judgment. I just wanted a chance." My heart pounded in my ears. Everything she said collided inside me at once. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and something deeper I didn't want to name yet. "You were going to introduce me to my own granddaughter," I said slowly. Rachel nodded. "Yes." My hands tightened on the chair, and instead of telling me the truth, you told me the trip was cancelled. Her eyes dropped again. "I panicked," she admitted. "When you started asking questions, when you wanted details, I felt like everything was going to fall apart before I had a chance to fix it." Emily spoke softly then. "She wasn't trying to hurt you," she said. "She was trying to protect what she had left to repair." I looked at Emily for a long moment, then back at Rachel. My daughter, my child, the girl I had raised, the girl who had just told me she had hidden a whole life from me. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, deeply. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say, I admitted. Rachel wiped her eyes quickly. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said again. I couldn't lose you over this. That was the first moment I noticed something else. This wasn't just about secrecy, it was about fear on both sides. I looked at Lily again. She was watching me now, careful, uncertain, not judging, just waiting. Slowly I spoke. So, I said quietly, you're my granddaughter. Lily hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Something in her voice softened, something inside me I didn't expect. I looked at Rachel again. You cancelled the trip, I said slowly, because you were afraid I wouldn't accept this. Rachel didn't answer immediately, but she didn't need to. Her silence said everything. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. The truth was heavier than I imagined, not because it was cruel, but because it was complicated. Painfully, messily human. And I had flown across an ocean thinking I was uncovering betrayal, only to realize I was standing in the middle of a family that had been afraid of itself for years. For a long time after Rachel finished speaking, none of us moved. The air between us felt fragile now, like even a small word spoken too sharply could break something that could never be repaired again. I kept looking at Lily, my granddaughter. Even saying the words silently in my mind felt unfamiliar, like I was trying on a language I had never been taught. She was sitting very still, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She was simply waiting, like a child who had learned not to expect too much from adults who were uncertain. That realization hit me harder than I expected. I had spent my entire life believing I was a good mother, and yet somehow this child, my own blood, was sitting in front of me like she didn't know what my reaction would be. My chest tightened. Rachel spoke softly, almost carefully. Mom, say something. I didn't answer right away, because for the first time I realized I didn't know what the right thing to say was. Anger was there. Yes. It sat just beneath the surface, pressing against every thought, not loud, but steady. A deep ache of betrayal, not just from the secrecy, but from the years lost without even knowing they existed. But something else was there too. Confusion. And underneath that, something I didn't want to admit yet. Sadness. I need a moment, I said finally. Rachel nodded quickly. Of course. Emily stayed silent, watching carefully like she understood this moment didn't belong to her. I stood up slowly. I'm not leaving, I added almost instinctively. I just need air. Rachel nodded again. I walked away from the seating area, my steps slower than I intended. The lobby felt brighter now, almost too bright, like everything had sharpened in detail. The sound of suitcases rolling across tile floors felt louder. Conversations around me felt sharper. I stepped outside into the warm Hawaiian air. It hit my face immediately, humid, heavy, alive. I took a deep breath, then another. But it didn't calm me, because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the same sentence. I have a daughter. No, not just a daughter, a granddaughter. A whole life I didn't know existed. I closed my eyes briefly. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered to myself. And for the first time, the answer didn't feel hidden anymore. It felt painfully obvious, because she was afraid of me, not because I had done something cruel, but because somewhere along the way, I had become someone she believed she couldn't disappoint. When I finally returned inside, Rachel looked up immediately. Her face was tense, exhausted, like she had been holding herself together with sheer force of will. Lily was still sitting quietly, but now she was watching me more closely. I sat down again. This time, I didn't look away. I want to understand something, I said slowly. Rachel nodded quickly. Okay, I took a breath. You said you didn't tell me because you were afraid I would judge you. Yes, she said quietly. And you believed I wouldn't accept her. I continued, glancing briefly at Lily. Rachel hesitated, then nodded again. Yes. The word hurt more than I expected. I looked at Lily directly. And you? Have you ever met me before today? She shook her head. No, ma'am. I felt something tighten in my throat. All these years, all these missed moments, birthdays I didn't know about, school events I never attended, milestones I never celebrated, a whole childhood I had never been part of. And yet I was sitting here now expected to understand it all in a single conversation, my hands pressed together tightly. I need you to be honest with me, I said, looking back at Rachel. Not just about this trip, about everything. Rachel nodded immediately. I will. There was a pause, a long one. Then I asked the question I didn't know I was ready for. Did you ever think I deserved to know? Rachel flinched slightly. Emily lowered her gaze. Lily looked between us, sensing the weight of the moment. Rachel swallowed. I did, she admitted. But I also thought, if I told you earlier, I would lose you. That sentence hung in the air longer than anything else. I felt my chest tighten again. You think honesty would make me leave you? I asked quietly. Rachel's eyes filled. I didn't know what kind of mother I would be, she said. And I didn't want you to look at me like I was less. The words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Less. Is that what she thought I would see? I leaned back slightly. I never raised you to believe love was conditional, I said. Rachel's voice cracked. I know. Silence again. Then Lily shifted slightly. For the first time she spoke. Are you mad at her? Her voice was small. Careful. The question wasn't just about Rachel, it was about herself. I turned to look at her, really look at her. This child had lived her entire life without knowing me, without me knowing her, and now she was sitting here afraid that I might reject her before I even understood her name. My throat tightened again. I'm not mad at you, I said gently. Her shoulders loosened slightly. Then I looked at Rachel. I am trying to understand you. Rachel nodded, tears still in her eyes. I know, she whispered. I exhaled slowly. The anger was still there, but something else was rising now. Something more complicated. Because I could see it clearly now, this wasn't just a lie told to deceive me. It was a life built around fear, fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. And somehow, I had been part of building that fear without realizing it. I want to ask you something else, I said quietly. Rachel nodded. Why Hawaii? That seemed to confuse her. She blinked. What do you mean? If this was about introducing me to her, I said, gesturing slightly toward Lily. Why here? Why not at home? Why not in a controlled environment? Rachel hesitated. Then Emily spoke softly. Because this was supposed to be safe, she said. Neutral ground, no expectations, no pressure, just a place where she could meet you without all the weight of history between you. I absorbed that, slowly. So this wasn't just about hiding, it was about trying to rebuild something, carefully. I looked back at Lily. Did you want to meet me? I asked her. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. A simple answer, but it landed deeply. I felt something shift inside me again, not fully softening, not fully breaking, but changing. Because beneath all the secrecy, there was something I hadn't expected to find. Not manipulation, not cruelty, just fear and love, both tangled together in a way that hurt to untangle. I leaned forward slightly. Rachel, I said quietly, you didn't just keep a secret from me. She looked at me carefully. You kept a whole person from me. Her eyes filled again. I know. Silence followed, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, real. And for the first time since arriving in Hawaii, I understood something clearly. This wasn't the end of a betrayal. It was the beginning of something we had no idea how to rebuild. I should have been overwhelmed, maybe even angry enough to walk away. But instead, I found myself sitting in that quiet corner of the resort lobby, staring at Rachel, Emily, and Lily, trying to understand how so much truth could exist in a single moment and still feel incomplete. Rachel had told me the most shocking part already. She had a daughter. My granddaughter was sitting just a few feet away from me, and yet something still didn't fully add up. Because secrets don't exist in isolation, they have layers, and I had lived long enough to recognize when I was only seeing the first one. Rachel shifted slightly in her seat. I know this is a lot, she said carefully, but there's something else you need to understand. I looked at her steadily. Then tell me, I said. She hesitated. Emily glanced at her as if silently encouraging her to continue. Lily stayed quiet, watching the floor again. Rachel exhaled. I didn't just hide Lily from you, she said slowly. I also kept her from my own life for a long time. That caught my attention. What do you mean? I asked. Rachel swallowed. After she was born, I wasn't involved in raising her, she said. Emily took care of her full-time, but I stayed in her life from a distance. Visits, small moments, birthdays when I could manage it. Her voice tightened slightly. But I never told anyone in my professional life. I never added her to anything official. I built my entire identity around being single, independent, unattached. I watched her carefully. That part didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Rachel had always been fiercely controlled about her image. Still, I said nothing. She continued. And then a few months ago, she said Lily started asking questions about me, about why things were the way they were, about why I wasn't fully present. Lily shifted slightly at the sound of her name, but didn't interrupt. Rachel's voice softened. She started wanting more than just occasional visits. She wanted a real relationship, a pause. And I realized I couldn't keep doing it the same way anymore. I leaned forward slightly. So this trip, I said slowly, was about that. Rachel nodded. Yes, Emily spoke gently. We've been working together to give Lily stability, she added. But Rachel wanted something more than distance. She wanted integration, family. The word landed heavily. Family. I looked at Lily again. She was still quiet, but now she was listening more closely, like she understood this part mattered deeply. Rachel continued. I thought Hawaii would be the safest way to start, she said. A place where we could all meet without the pressure of home, without expectations from your past relationship with me. I exhaled slowly. So, you didn't just lie to me, I said. You constructed an entire scenario where you thought I would react better. Rachel looked down. Yes, the honesty was there now. But so was something else. Exhaustion. Years of it. I could see it in her face, the strain of holding multiple versions of the truth at once, until they finally collided here. I rubbed my hands together slowly. And Emily, I asked. Emily straightened slightly. I am a friend of Rachel's, she said calmly. But more than that, I've been Lily's legal guardian for most of her life. Rachel trusted me to provide stability when she felt she couldn't. I studied her for a moment. There was no defensiveness in her voice, only clarity. And Lily knows all of this, I asked. Emily nodded gently. Yes, in age-appropriate ways. Lily looked up slightly at that, then back down. My chest tightened again, but differently now. This wasn't chaos. It was structure. A structure built quietly over years. without me in it. I leaned back slowly in my seat. The realization wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy. I want to understand something, I said quietly. Rachel nodded immediately. Anything. I looked directly at her. Why tell me at all now? That question seemed to stop her. She blinked, then looked at Lily, then back at me. Her voice softened. Because I couldn't keep living like this, she admitted. I couldn't keep separating parts of my life and pretending they didn't affect each other. And I wanted Lily to know where she comes from, not just with Emily, but with me. And with you. The word you lingered. I felt something shift again inside me, slowly, carefully. And you were afraid I wouldn't accept that, I said. Rachel nodded once. Yes. Silence stretched between us again, but this time it felt different, not empty, just unresolved. I looked at Lily again. She was watching me now more directly, curious, cautious, waiting. I realized something then. She wasn't afraid of me the way Rachel had been. She was simply unsure of me, and that distinction mattered, because fear builds walls. Uncertainty leaves doors open. I exhaled slowly. I need to ask you something, Lily, I said gently. She straightened slightly. Yes, ma'am. The formality made my chest ache unexpectedly. You've been told I didn't know about you, I said. What did you think that meant about me? She hesitated. Emily didn't interrupt. Rachel stayed silent. Finally, Lily spoke. I thought, maybe you didn't want to know. The words were simple, but they carried weight. I nodded slowly. That's a fair thought, I said quietly. Rachel flinched slightly at that, but I didn't look at her yet. Instead, I focused on Lily. But that's not true, I added. I didn't know, and I should have. Silence again. This one softer, less defensive, more honest. I turned back to Rachel. You made decisions to protect something, I said, but in doing that you also created distance that none of us knew how to cross. Rachel's eyes filled again. I know, she whispered. I studied her for a long moment. This wasn't the daughter I thought I was coming to confront. This was someone who had been carrying fear for decades, just like I had been carrying expectations, two different kinds of weight, both heavy in their own way. I leaned forward slightly. I didn't come here to punish you, I said quietly. Rachel looked up at me quickly. But I also didn't come here to be kept in the dark anymore. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I understand, she said. I turned to Lily again. And this time I allowed my voice to soften more intentionally. I need time, I told her gently. But I want you to know, I'm glad I know you now. Something changed in her expression. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. A small breath released. A tiny easing of tension she had probably been holding since I arrived. Emily looked down, quietly emotional. Rachel covered her mouth briefly as if holding herself together. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected when I boarded the plane. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret. It was about deciding what came after it. And I didn't have that answer yet. But for the first time since this began, I wasn't walking away from it either. After everything was finally said out loud, the silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like exhaustion, like all of us had been holding our breath for years without realizing it, and only now were learning how to exhale again. Rachel was the first to break it. "Mom," she said softly, almost hesitantly, "I didn't expect you to come here like this." I looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't expect to find out I had a granddaughter on a resort island in Hawaii," I replied quietly. That should have sounded sharper than it did, but it didn't. Rachel gave a small, shaky nod as if she agreed that nothing about this situation had unfolded in any predictable way. Lily shifted slightly in her seat, glancing between us again. I noticed she kept doing that, constantly checking the emotional temperature of the room, like she had learned early that adults could change suddenly. That thought stayed with me longer than I liked. Emily finally spoke. Maybe we should give this a little space, she suggested gently. It's been a lot for one moment. I considered that. She wasn't wrong, but something inside me wasn't ready to step away yet. Not because I wanted confrontation, but because I needed clarity before distance blurred everything again. No, I said calmly. I think we've already been in space for too many years. Rachel's eyes dropped at that. Not in defense, in recognition. That hit her harder than anything I had said so far. I leaned forward slightly. There's something I still don't understand, I continued, and I need you to be honest with me, Rachel. She nodded immediately. I will. I studied her carefully. You said you were afraid I wouldn't accept Lily, I said, but you also said you still kept her in your life in some way. So, why now? Why bring me here? Why this moment? Rachel inhaled slowly. I couldn't keep living two separate lives, she admitted. It was breaking me. And Lily deserved more than fragments of me. She deserved all of me. Her voice trembled slightly on the last sentence. And I wanted you to know her, she added, not just as a secret, not just as something I was ashamed of, but as my daughter. There it was again, that word, ashamed. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. Rachel continued. I thought if I controlled the situation, if I brought you here, if I prepared everything carefully, you would see her the way I see her. And how do you see her? I asked softly. Rachel turned toward Lily. Her expression changed immediately. Warmer, softer, real. Like someone I never stopped loving, she said. Lily looked down, but I saw her lips pressed together slightly like she was trying not to react too strongly. Emily reached out and gently rested a hand on Lily's shoulder. I watched that interaction closely. There was something steady there, something real, not chaos, not deception, just a long, complicated arrangement built around a child who had grown up inside it. I exhaled slowly. And where do I fit into all of this now? I asked. The question wasn't accusatory, it was honest. Rachel hesitated. That's what I don't know yet, she admitted. I appreciated that answer more than I expected. Because at least it was true. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. Rachel blinked, slightly surprised. I'm not here to force answers you don't have, I continued, but I also won't pretend this doesn't change everything. She nodded again. I understand. A pause settled between us. Not uncomfortable this time, just uncertain. Then Lily spoke again quietly. Do you live near us? She asked. The question was simple, but it cut through everything else. I looked at her directly. Yes, I said, in another state. Not far, but not close either. She nodded, slowly absorbing that. Then she asked something that surprised me even more. Would you want to visit again? The question wasn't hesitant. It was curious, open, and it made my throat tighten slightly. I looked at Rachel before answering. I think I said carefully that depends on what kind of relationship we build from here. Lily seemed to consider that seriously, then nodded. Okay, just like that. No pressure, no expectation, just acceptance of uncertainty. Children, I realized, are often better at that than adults. Rachel exhaled softly, almost like she had been holding her breath, waiting for that moment. Emily spoke again. We don't have to solve everything today, she said gently. We just needed to start. I looked at her. She was right. This wasn't a problem with a quick solution. It was a life that had been split apart for years and was only now trying to fold itself back together. Carefully, unevenly, with too many missing edges. I leaned back slightly. I need to ask one more thing, I said. Rachel tensed a little, but nodded. Go ahead. I looked at her steadily. Do you regret not telling me sooner? The question hung in the air. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't know, but because she did. And whatever she said had to be honest enough to survive the moment. Finally, she nodded. Yes, she said quietly. I do. A pause. Then she added, but I also don't know how I could have done it differently at the time. That distinction mattered. It wasn't justification, it was reflection. I accepted that, slowly. Then I turned my gaze toward Lily again. You didn't do anything wrong, I said gently. She blinked, slightly startled. I just want you to know that I added, none of this is your responsibility. Her shoulders eased a little. Okay, she said softly. Emily smiled faintly at that, as if grateful for the acknowledgement. Rachel wiped her eyes quickly, trying to regain composure. I noticed that too. All of them were carrying something. Different burdens, different timelines, different fears. And I had walked into the middle of it like a missing piece none of them were prepared for. Or maybe, like a piece they had been afraid to look for. I stood up slowly. I think I need some air again, I said. Rachel nodded immediately. Okay. This time there was no panic in her voice, only understanding. I stepped away from the seating area once more, walking toward the open edge of the resort where the ocean stretched out endlessly. The sound of waves reached me before I even saw them clearly. I stopped near the railing and looked out. The water was calm, steady. Uncomplicated in a way my life suddenly wasn't. Behind me, I could still feel the presence of everything I had just learned pressing gently against my thoughts. A granddaughter I never knew, a daughter who had been afraid of me, a life hidden not out of cruelty, but out of fear of not being enough. I closed my eyes briefly. This wasn't resolution, not yet. But it wasn't collapse either. It was something in between. Something fragile, something real. And for the first time since I boarded the plane, I understood one simple truth. The story wasn't about what I had been kept from. It was about what I still had the chance to build if I chose to stay. I stayed by the ocean longer than I intended. The waves rolled in steadily, unbothered by anything happening inside my life. Watching them, I realized how strange it was that the world could remain so calm while everything I thought I understood had just been rearranged. Behind me, I could still feel their presence in the lobby area, Rachel, Emily, and Lily waiting without pushing me, as if they instinctively understood I needed space not to escape, but to absorb. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't trying to solve anything. I was simply feeling it. The weight of it, the reality of it. A granddaughter I never knew existed, a daughter who had carried a secret so heavy it had shaped her entire adult life. And me, a mother who had believed she understood her child completely, only to realize how much silence had lived between us. I opened my eyes slowly. The ocean didn't change, but I had. When I finally turned back, I walked with slower steps, not because I was unsure, but because I was aware that whatever happened next would define something important, not just for Rachel, not just for Lily, but for me. They were still there when I returned. Rachel stood up slightly as soon as she saw me, as if ready to read my expression before I even spoke. Lily looked up too, more cautiously this time. Emily remained seated calm but attentive. I sat down again. No one spoke immediately. I took a breath. I've been thinking, I said quietly. Rachel nodded once. I continued. I believe you when you say you were afraid, I said. And I believe you didn't intend to hurt me. Rachel's eyes filled instantly, but she didn't interrupt. But I also need you to understand something, I added. Her posture tightened slightly. I looked directly at her. You didn't just hide Lily from me, I said. You hid an entire chapter of your life that I should have been part of. And I need time to understand what that means for us. Rachel nodded quickly. Yes, I understand. I shifted my gaze toward Lily. And I want you to know, I said gently, that I'm not here to disappear from your life again. Lily blinked, surprised. But she didn't look away. That mattered. Then I looked back at Rachel. I need honesty from now on, I said firmly but not harshly, even when it's uncomfortable. Rachel nodded immediately. I promise. I studied her face for a long moment. She looked exhausted, not just from today, but from years of carrying something alone. And for the first time, I saw her not just as my daughter, but as a woman who had made a painful decision and lived inside it for too long. I exhaled slowly. I'm not going to pretend I'm not hurt, I added, because I am, deeply, but I also won't pretend I don't want to understand this family. The word felt strange as I said it, but not wrong. Emily's expression softened slightly at that. Lily shifted in her seat again, a little more relaxed. Rachel covered her mouth, briefly, tears slipping down her cheeks now without resistance. I didn't think you would say that, she whispered. I looked at her. I didn't think I would be here, I replied honestly. A faint, almost emotional laugh escaped her through tears. That small sound changed something in the air. It didn't fix anything, but it softened the edges. Later that afternoon, we agreed quietly, carefully to walk together. No big decisions, no dramatic resolutions, just movement. A way to exist in the same space without pressure. We walked along a garden path within the resort surrounded by tropical plants and soft ocean breeze. At first, no one spoke much. It felt like we were all afraid of breaking the fragile balance we had just managed to create. Lily walked slightly ahead, then slowed down so she was closer to me. After a while, she spoke. Do you like books? She asked suddenly. I looked at her slightly surprised. Yes, I said. Very much. She nodded thoughtfully. My school library has this series about oceans, she said. I like them because they explain things that feel big, but in a way I can understand. I smiled faintly. That sounds like a good way to look at the world, I said. She nodded again, pleased. Rachel walked a step behind us, watching quietly. Emily stayed beside her. I noticed Rachel wasn't interrupting this time. She wasn't controlling the moment. She was just present. That alone felt significant. We reached a small overlook area where the ocean was visible again. We stopped there. Lily leaned slightly on the railing. Rachel stood beside her, hesitating before gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Lily didn't move away. That simple gesture felt like something important shifting into place. I watched them for a moment. Then I spoke quietly. I think I missed a lot, I said. Rachel looked at me. Yes, she admitted softly. I nodded. But I'm here now. Silence followed. Not heavy this time, just real. That evening, after we separated for a few hours of rest, I sat alone in my room. For the first time since arriving, I allowed myself to think not about what had been hidden, but about what could still exist. I looked at the photograph I had brought with me, the old picture of Rachel and me standing in front of our house years ago. We looked simpler then, not happier, just less complicated. I held it for a long time, then I placed it gently on the bedside table, not as something I was holding on to, but as something I understood differently now. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined everything that came next. Outside, the ocean continued its steady rhythm, and for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel when I boarded that flight. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but possibility. Slow, uncertain, but real. The next morning in Hawaii felt different. Not because anything outside had changed, the ocean still moved in its steady rhythm. The palm trees still swayed lazily in the warm breeze. But because something inside me had shifted. I woke up earlier than usual, not from anxiety this time, but from thoughtfulness. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't bracing myself for impact. I was processing. Slowly, carefully, and that in itself felt like progress. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment before getting ready. My reflection in the mirror looked the same as always. Older, yes, more tired around the eyes, but there was something different in my expression now. Less confusion, more acceptance. Not full understanding, but willingness. We agreed to meet for breakfast in the resort cafe. When I arrived, Rachel was already there with Lily and Emily. They had saved me a seat. Rachel looked up immediately when I entered, her expression cautious but hopeful at the same time. I gave a small nod as I approached. "Good morning," I said. "Morning, Mum," Rachel replied softly. Lily gave a small wave. "Hi, good morning," I said gently, sitting down. Emily offered a polite smile but stayed quiet, giving space for the moment. For a few seconds, no one spoke. It wasn't awkward, just careful. Rachel finally broke the silence. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. I considered the question honestly. Better than I expected, I admitted. That seemed to surprise her slightly. But I didn't elaborate. Not yet. A server came by and we ordered breakfast. The normality of it felt strange. Coffee cups, menus, polite exchanges, like we were pretending for a moment that everything was simple. But nothing was simple anymore. And we all knew it. When the server left, Rachel looked at me again. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," she began carefully. I nodded slightly. She continued. "You said you need honesty from now on," she said. "And you're right." I waited. Rachel took a breath. "There's something else I didn't tell you yet," she admitted. My chest tightened slightly, but I stayed calm. "Go on," I said. Rachel glanced at Lily briefly before speaking again. "Lily doesn't know everything about how I handled things when she was younger," she said quietly. "I've told her pieces, but not the full truth about how disconnected I was at certain points." Lily shifted slightly in her seat, listening. Rachel continued, her voice lower now. "There were times I stepped away more than I should have," she said. "Times I told myself I was doing it for stability, but really I was avoiding responsibility I wasn't ready for." A heavy silence followed. Emily didn't interrupt, neither did I. Rachel's eyes lowered. "I don't say that to excuse anything," she added quickly. "I just want to be honest now, fully honest." That mattered. I could feel it. Not perfection, not control, just truth finally spoken without filtering. I looked at Lily. She was watching Rachel quietly, not angry, not shocked, just processing. That told me something important about the environment she had grown up in. She had learned to listen to truth, not collapse under it. That was good. I turned back to Rachel. "Why tell me this now?" I asked gently. Rachel hesitated. "Because I don't want to repeat the same pattern," she said. "Hiding things, delaying truth, letting fear decide timing." I nodded slowly. That was understandable and honest. A pause settled over the table again. Then Lily spoke unexpectedly. "Is it bad that I didn't know all of that already?" she asked quietly. Rachel turned to her immediately. "No," she said firmly. "It means I tried to protect you from confusion, but maybe I overprotected you from truth too." Lily considered that, then nodded slightly. "Okay." Simple, but thoughtful. I watched them both carefully. There was something developing here that I hadn't seen before. Not a perfect family, not a repaired one either, but an honest one, and that mattered more than I expected. After breakfast, Lily asked if we could walk again. This time she reached for my hand first, not hesitantly, just naturally. I looked down at her small hand in mine for a brief moment before gently holding it. It was unfamiliar, but not wrong. We walked along a quieter garden path behind the resort. Rachel and Emily followed a few steps behind, giving space. Lily looked up at me as we walked. "Do you think people can change?" she asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. I thought carefully before answering. "Yes," I said slowly. but not all at once, and not perfectly. She nodded. That's what my teacher says too, she replied. I smiled faintly. Your teacher sounds wise. She smiled a little at that. After a moment, she asked something else. Do you think Mom is a bad person? The question stopped me slightly. I looked ahead for a moment before answering. No, I said honestly. I don't think she's bad. Lily glanced up at me. But you were upset yesterday. I admitted, and I still have feelings to sort through, but being upset doesn't always mean someone is bad. It means something hurt us. She considered that quietly, then nodded again. Okay. We continued walking. I noticed something subtle as we went. She was no longer scanning my reactions constantly. There was more ease now, more presence. That alone told me we were moving in the right direction. Later that afternoon, I sat alone for a while near the ocean again. Rachel had taken Lily to the pool with Emily, giving me space without needing to be asked. I appreciated that more than I could say. I watched the horizon for a long time, thinking, not about secrets anymore, but about time. How easily it slips into silence when people are afraid. How much of a life can exist without ever being spoken aloud? And how much pain comes not from truth itself, but from delay? I thought about Rachel as a young woman, trying, failing, learning, carrying fear she never outgrew. I thought about myself too, about expectations I never meant to impose so heavily, and I wondered how many things I had assumed were understood that were never actually said. The ocean rolled in again, steady, unchanging. But I wasn't the same person who arrived here, that much was certain. I stood up slowly, not because I had all the answers, but because I was ready to stop running from the questions. And for the first time since this began, that felt like enough. By the fourth day in Hawaii, something subtle had changed in the rhythm between us. Not everything was healed, not everything was clear, but the tension that once filled every silence had softened into something more manageable, like a wound that was no longer bleeding even if it still hurt to touch. We weren't pretending anymore, and strangely that made everything easier to breathe. That morning, Rachel suggested we all go to a small beach just outside the resort. Nothing elaborate, no schedules, no structured conversations, just time together in a space that didn't feel like a courtroom or a confession booth. I agreed. And for the first time, I didn't feel resistance when I said yes. The beach was quieter than the main resort area. The sand was softer, almost pale gold under the morning sun. The water stretched out calm and endless, like it had no interest in the complications of human life. Lily ran ahead immediately, kicking off her sandals, laughing softly as the sand gave way under her feet. Emily followed at a slower pace, carrying a small bag with towels and water. Rachel walked beside me. Neither of us spoke at first. We just walked, side by side, not fixed, not healed, but present. After a while, Rachel broke the silence. I keep thinking about what you said, she admitted quietly. I glanced at her. Which part, I asked. She gave a small, slightly tired smile. All of it, she said. But especially, when you said being upset doesn't mean someone is bad. I nodded slowly. That still stands, I said. She looked down at the sand for a moment. I think I spent so many years preparing for you to reject me. She said that I never prepared for what would happen if you didn't. That honesty landed softly but deeply. I considered her words. That's because you assumed the ending before the story was finished, I said. She looked at me. I continued gently. You decided what I would think of you without ever giving me the chance to actually respond. Rachel exhaled. I know. A pause. Then she added, I'm trying to stop doing that. I believed her, not because everything was fixed, but because change doesn't usually sound dramatic. It sounds like this: quiet admissions, small corrections, awareness that comes too late but still comes. We reached Lily and Emily near the shoreline. Lily was crouched down, watching small waves curl around her feet. When she saw us approach, she stood up quickly, brushing sand off her hands. "Mom, look," she said excitedly, pointing at something in the water. "There are tiny fish here." Rachel smiled slightly. "Careful not to get too far in," she said automatically, then paused as if realizing she wasn't giving an order, just participating. Lily nodded but didn't stop smiling. That small moment stayed with me. Simple, uncomplicated. A child enjoying the ocean without fear. A mother watching without controlling. It wasn't perfect, but it was healthier than anything I had seen so far. Emily set the towels down near us and sat on the sand watching quietly. After a while, Lily came back and sat closer to me. Not directly, but closer than before. She picked up a shell and handed it to me. "I found this," she said. I took it gently. It was small, slightly uneven with faint ridges along one side. "Thank you," I said softly. She smiled. "You can keep it." I turned it in my hand slowly. It felt insignificant, and yet it didn't. Later, Rachel sat down beside me while Lily played a little further down the shore with Emily. We watched them for a moment in silence. Then Rachel spoke. "I want to ask you something," she said carefully. I nodded. "Go ahead." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we can be okay again?" The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was honest. And that made it harder. I didn't answer immediately because the truth was complicated. We weren't who we were before. We couldn't be, but that didn't mean we were lost. I chose my words carefully. "I don't think 'again' is the right word," I said finally. Rachel looked at me. I continued. "I think we can be okay in a new way, but it won't look like before." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Another pause. Then she added quietly, "I don't want to lose you." That sentence carried years inside it. Fear, regret, love that had been buried under silence. I looked at her for a long moment. "You won't," I said gently, "but I need honesty now, not fear deciding for you." She nodded immediately. "I can do that." I believed she was trying, and trying mattered, even when it wasn't perfect, even when it was late. As the sun began to lower slightly in the sky, Lily came back and sat between us without hesitation this time. She held out another shell. "This one is for you too, Mom," she said to Rachel. Rachel blinked, then smiled softly. "Thank you." It was a small exchange, but I saw something important in it. Connection forming not through explanation, but through presence. Emily watched quietly from a distance, her expression calm, almost relieved. I understood why. She had been the stabilizing force for years, and now for the first time, she didn't need to hold everything together alone. Before we left the beach, Lily ran ahead again, laughing as the waves chased her feet. Rachel called after her gently, "Stay where I can see you." But this time it didn't sound anxious, just caring. I stood up slowly, brushing sand from my hands. Rachel did the same. We stood side by side again, watching Lily for a moment. Then Rachel said quietly, "I know this will take time." I nodded. "It will." She looked at me. "But you're still here." I met her eyes. "Yes," I said simply. "I am." And for the first time since I arrived in Hawaii, I realized something important. I hadn't just come here to uncover a secret. I had come here to decide whether something broken could still grow differently, not return to what it was, but become something else entirely, something slower, something honest, something real. As we walked back together toward the resort, Lily's laughter still echoed behind us in the wind. And I didn't feel like I was stepping back into a family I didn't recognize anymore. I felt like I was beginning to learn one. The final day in Hawaii arrived quietly without ceremony. No dramatic conversations, no sudden revelations, No emotional breaking points like the ones that had defined the beginning of this trip. Just a calm morning light spilling across the resort and the soft sound of waves outside the window. I woke earlier than everyone else. For a while, I simply sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the silence. Not the painful kind I had known after David passed. Not the tense silence from the first day I discovered the truth about Rachel, but something gentler, a silence that felt like it was finally giving me permission to think without fear of what I might uncover next. We had agreed to spend the last day together without plans, no structured conversations, no final talks, just time. When I stepped outside, I found Rachel already sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee. Lily was nearby, half curled in a chair, still waking up. Emily was quietly arranging breakfast on a small outdoor table. Rachel looked up when she saw me. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," I replied. There was no hesitation anymore when I sat down. That alone felt significant. Lily stretched, then smiled when she saw me. "Good morning," she said again, like she had the habit of greeting me now. I nodded warmly. "Good morning?" Rachel watched that exchange quietly, a faint softness in her expression. Not relief exactly, but something close. We ate together slowly. Nothing rushed. No emotional weight pressing on every sentence anymore. Just small moments. Coffee cups clinking gently. The sound of birds nearby. Lily asking simple questions about the ocean again. At one point, she turned to me and asked, "Will you come visit us?" The question wasn't hesitant this time. It was natural, as if the idea of future contact had become something real instead of uncertain. I looked at her carefully. "Yes," I said after a moment. "I think I will." She smiled immediately, like that answer mattered more than I realized. Rachel looked down at her coffee, then up at me again. "Me too?" she asked softly. I smiled faintly. "Yes, Rachel, you too." Her expression changed slightly at that, subtle but emotional. Not overwhelming, just real. After breakfast, Lily wanted to walk to the beach one last time. We all went together, the same path, the same sand. But it felt different now, less like discovery, more like closure. Lily ran ahead again, but not far. She stayed within sight. Every so often she would turn back and check if we were still there. And we always were. Rachel walked beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said quietly, "I used to think that telling you the truth would destroy everything." I glanced at her. "And now I asked." She thought for a moment. "Now I think hiding it almost did." That honesty was simple, but it carried weight. I nodded slowly. Sometimes I said the thing we're afraid of isn't the truth itself. It's the moment before it's understood. Rachel considered that, then nodded. I like that. When we reached the shoreline, Lily knelt in the sand again, drawing shapes with her fingers. Emily stood a little behind her, watching with quiet calm. Rachel and I stood side by side again, looking out at the water. The ocean didn't change for us. It never did. But we had. Rachel spoke softly. "I know this didn't fix everything," she said. "It didn't?" I agreed. She looked at me. "But it started something." I took a moment before answering. "Yes," I said. "It did." A pause. Then I added, "And that's enough for now." Rachel exhaled slowly, like she had been holding that thought for a long time. "Okay," she said, not in disappointment, in acceptance. Lily came back toward us carrying another shell. "This one is the last one," she said seriously, holding it up like a small treasure. She looked at me first, then at Rachel. Then she placed it gently into my hand. "For you," she said. I looked at it for a moment, then at her. "Thank you," I said quietly. Rachel watched that exchange without interrupting, and in her eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not fear, not control, just presence. Later that afternoon, we sat together under a shaded area near the resort garden. Suitcases were packed. The return flight was approaching. The reality of leaving was settling in slowly, but it didn't feel like an ending anymore. It felt like a transition. Rachel turned to me. "I don't want this to be goodbye," she said quietly. "It isn't," I replied. She nodded, but her eyes were still emotional. "I just don't want to go back to how it was before," she admitted. I understood what she meant. We wouldn't. We couldn't, because before was built on silence, and silence had already been replaced. "I don't either," I said honestly. That seemed to ease something in her shoulders. Before we left for the airport, Lily ran up and hugged Rachel first. Then unexpectedly, she turned and hugged me too. Small arms. Careful, but real. I hesitated only for a second before returning the gesture. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't familiar, but it was genuine, and that mattered more. Emily stood nearby, watching with a soft expression. "I think she's going to remember this," she said quietly. "I hope so," Rachel replied. "I think I will too," I added. Rachel looked at me then and smiled. A small, tired, honest smile. Not the kind that hides fear, the kind that survives it. At the airport, everything felt calmer than when I arrived. I expected emotional chaos. Instead, I found quiet understanding. We said goodbye without dramatic words, just simple ones. "Call me. Text me when you land. I will." And Lily, before we separated, said something very simple. "I like having a grandmother." That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected, because it wasn't complicated, it wasn't afraid, it just was. On the plane home, I looked out the window as Hawaii slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. I thought about everything that had happened, the lie, the discovery, the shock, the truth, and finally, the beginning of something new, not perfect, not healed, but real. I didn't know exactly what my relationship with Rachel would look like in the future. I didn't know how often I would see Lily. I didn't know how much time would be needed to fully understand everything we had uncovered. But I knew this much. We were no longer strangers pretending to be family. We were family learning how to exist honestly for the first time. And as the plane lifted higher into the sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not control, not certainty, but peace. Quiet, fragile, but real. And sometimes that is how healing begins. I used to believe that love in families was supposed to be clear, stable, and uncomplicated, that if you raised a child well, they would never feel the need to hide parts of their life from you, that honesty would naturally exist between people who cared for each other. But life is rarely that simple. What I learned in Hawaii is that silence is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is fear wearing a quieter face, fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of not being understood by the people we care about the most. Rachel didn't hide Lily from me because she didn't love her. She hid her because she loved her and feared losing everything she had built with me if the truth came out in the wrong way. And I, in my own way, had contributed to that fear without realizing it. Expectations, even unspoken ones, can become heavy, too heavy. But what matters is not only what was broken, it is what can still be built after the truth is finally spoken. Meeting Lily changed something inside me, not just because she is my granddaughter, but because she represents a second chance not to redo the past, but to build something more honest in the present. I don't believe families need to be perfect to be real. I believe they need to be honest enough to grow. And sometimes that growth begins in the most unexpected places, even in a resort on a distant island where truth finally catches up with silence. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone you loved revealed a truth that changed everything you thought you knew? How did you respond? Did you walk away, or did you try to rebuild? I would truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More emotional family stories are coming soon.